The old alien sat in the corner of the dark bar, his forearms shaking as he held his drink. His name was Vex Talith, and he had been a commander in the Zaffron Fleet for over 40 years. Now he was old, tired, and haunted by memories he had kept secret for too long. Across from him sat a young journalist who had traveled across 3-star systems to hear his story. Her recording device sat on the table between them, waiting to capture words that had never been spoken before. "You really want to know about the human wars?" Vextalith asked, his voice rough and quiet. "Everyone thinks they know what happened. They have parades, statues, songs about brave human soldiers. Children learn about the heroes from Earth who saved the galaxy." He took a long drink and stared at the wall. "They have no idea what really happened out there, no idea at all." Crixana leaned forward. She had spent months tracking down this old veteran, following rumors and whispers about someone who had fought alongside humans during the Great War. Most aliens who had served with humans refused to talk about it. They would just shake their heads and change the subject. "Tell me," she said softly. "Tell me what really happened." Vex Talith was quiet for a long time, then he began to speak. "It started at the Battle of Crimson Nebula. My fleet was losing badly. The Dominion had us surrounded, and we were running out of ships fast. We had sent out distress calls, but help was days away. We were preparing to surrender when something appeared on our sensors." He paused, remembering one ship, just one human ship coming out of nowhere, the USS Liberty, commanded by Captain Jake Sullivan. We had heard rumors about humans joining the war, but this was our first time seeing them. "What did you expect them to do?" Crixana asked. "What any smart captain would do, turn around and run, call for backup, maybe try some long-range attacks. The Dominion had 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. We had maybe 6 ships left that could still fight. One more ship wouldn't change anything." Beaks Talith's eyes got distant, but Captain Sullivan didn't do any of those things. He opened a communication channel to us. I still remember his exact words. He said, "Hey, there, looks like you folks could use a hand. Mind if we join the party?" "A party?" Crixana repeated. "That's what he called it, a party, like we were having fun instead of dying." Vextalith shook his head. "My communications officer told him about the enemy numbers, warned him that this was a suicide mission." Sullivan just laughed and said, "Sounds like good odds to me." The old commander's voice got quieter. Then he did something I had never seen in 40 years of military service. He pointed his ship straight at the Dominion dreadnought and hit full speed. He was going to ram it. That's what we thought. At first, ramming attacks were desperate moves, usually didn't work against heavy armor, but as the Liberty got closer, we realized something was wrong. The ship wasn't slowing down, it was speeding up. Vextalith took another drink. The Dominion captain must have thought the same thing. He didn't even bother to move his ship, a small human vessel. Ramming a dreadnought was like throwing a rock at a mountain. It shouldn't have done any damage at all, but something else happened. As the Liberty approached, Captain Sullivan opened a channel to the enemy ship, not to surrender or negotiate, but to talk. He started telling the Dominion captain about human military history, battles where humans had won against impossible odds. He talked about something called The Alamo, where a few hundred humans held off thousands of enemies. He mentioned Thermopylae, where 300 soldiers fought an entire army. Was he trying to scare them? No, that's what made it so strange. He sounded excited, like he was sharing his favorite stories. He told them about human tactics, human weapons, human ways of fighting, and while he talked, his ship kept getting closer. The Liberty didn't ram the dreadnought. Instead, at the last second, it spun around and came alongside the huge enemy ship. Suddenly, the human vessel opened fire with weapons that shouldn't have existed. The beams that came from the Liberty weren't like anything in our military databases. They didn't just damage the dreadnought's armor, they seemed to convince it to fall apart. Whole plates started separating, weapon systems shut down, and the enemy ship just stopped working, like someone had politely asked it to please stop being a spaceship for a while, and it had agreed. Vexilith's 4 hands gestured helplessly. In 30 seconds, the most powerful ship in the Dominion fleet was floating dead in space. But Captain Sullivan wasn't finished. He opened another channel, this time to all the remaining enemy ships. He said, "Hi there, folks, I'm Jake Sullivan from Earth. I've just disabled your biggest ship using what we call aggressive friendship. Now you have 2 choices. You can surrender and we'll all go home safe, or you can keep fighting and I'll have to show you some of our other human innovations. Fair warning though, the next one involves turning your weapons into party decorations." The Dominion fleet had been winning the battle just minutes before. They had superior numbers, better weapons, and years of combat experience, but something in Captain Sullivan's voice made them pause. 3 of their ships immediately surrendered. The others tried to attack the Liberty, but their weapons wouldn't fire properly. Every time they targeted the human ship, their targeting computers would display error messages like "unable to harm friendlies" and "please reconsider your life choices." How is that possible? We didn't know. We still don't know. The humans had somehow convinced the enemy's own weapons that they were on the wrong side. Within an hour, the entire Dominion fleet had either surrendered or fled. The Battle of Crimson Nebula, which should have been a disaster for the Allied forces, became the first major victory of the war. After it was over, Captain Sullivan contacted our fleet. He wanted to make sure we were okay, asked if we needed medical supplies or repairs. He offered to share his crew's coffee with us, said it was pretty good for space rations. Vexilith looked directly at the journalist. "Do you understand what I'm telling you? This human had just defeated an entire enemy fleet using weapons that defied physics, and he was worried about whether we had enough coffee. What did you think of the humans?" After that, I thought they were incredibly lucky. Maybe they had some new technology we didn't understand. I reported the battle to my superiors, recommended that we study human tactics and equipment. I thought we could learn from them. The old commander finished his drink and signaled for another. I had no idea that the Battle of Crimson Nebula was Captain Sullivan holding back. What we saw that day was him being careful, trying not to scare us too much. Later, I learned that he had written in his report that the Dominion fleet was a nice warm-up exercise and that his crew was just getting started. So the humans were more powerful than they appeared. Vex Talith looked at her with an expression that might have been Fear or respect or both, more powerful. No, that's not the right word. They weren't more powerful, they were something else. Entirely, something that made power irrelevant. He paused as the bartender brought his new drink, but I didn't understand that yet. None of us did. We thought we had gained some useful allies, maybe learned some new tricks. We had no idea that we had just witnessed the single most restrained display of force in galactic history. When did you realize the truth? It took months, battle after battle, watching humans do impossible things while acting like everything was perfectly normal. Watching them treat the laws of physics like polite suggestions they could choose to ignore. Vextalith stared into his drink. The worst part wasn't that they were so powerful. The worst part was that they genuinely seemed to like us. They wanted to be friends, wanted to help, wanted to protect everyone in the galaxy from the Dominion. That sounds like a good thing. It is, but it's also terrifying in ways you can't imagine until you've seen what humans can do when they really care about something. Craig Santa watched as Vex Talith ordered another drink. The old alien's forehands were steadier now that he had started talking, but his eyes still held that distant look of someone remembering things he wished he could forget. The next time I encountered humans was 3 months later. He continued, the siege of Alter Prime. The Dominion had built a fortress on top of the highest mountain on the planet. It was supposed to be impossible to attack. He gestured with one of his arms. Picture a mountain so tall it reached into the clouds, with a fortress carved right into the rock. The only way up was a narrow path that wound around the mountain 17 times. The Dominion had placed weapons at every turn, shields covering every approach. 17 different allied species had tried to take that fortress over 3 years. All of them failed. How many troops did you lose in the attempts? Thousands. The path was so narrow that we could only send a few soldiers at a time. The enemy could pick us off easily. We had tried everything. Air attacks bounced off their shields. Orbital bombardment couldn't reach the fortress because of the mountain's shape. Underground tunnels collapsed because of the rock type. It was perfect defense. Vextalith paused to drink. When the humans arrived, I was part of the briefing team. We showed them detailed maps, explained all the failed attack plans, listed every weapon the enemy had. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Carter listened to everything very carefully. She asked good questions about troop numbers, supply lines, and defensive positions. She sounded like a proper military officer. She did. Professional, thorough, experienced. I thought finally we had some allies who understood modern warfare. Then she asked her final question. Vextalith's voice got quiet. She said, do you have any spare explosives lying around, and maybe some mining equipment? The journalist leaned forward. Mining equipment, that's what I asked. Carter smiled and said, well, if the mountain is the problem, maybe we should ask it politely to move. I thought she was joking. My translator must have made an error, but her aide, Sergeant Pete Williams, was already making notes about industrial explosives and earth-moving machinery. Were they planning to tunnel through the mountain? No, that would have made sense. What they actually planned was much worse. Vextalith shook his head slowly. Carter gathered her battalion and gave them what she called a creative briefing. She told them that the fortress was indeed impossible to attack, so they weren't going to attack it. Then what were they They were going to. Relocate, Iriksana stared at him. Relocate a mountain fortress, not the fortress, the mountain, Vex's voice was barely above a whisper. Carter had studied the geological surveys. She found that the mountain was mostly held up by 3 key rock formations at the base. Her plan was to remove those formations and let gravity do the art. Rest, that's impossible. You can't just knock down a mountain. That's what I told her. Mountains don't fall down just because you blow up some rocks at the bottom. The physics don't work that way. Carter listened to my explanation, nodded politely and said, "You're absolutely right. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't work at all. Normal circumstances." She patted me on the shoulder with one hand while making notes with the other. "But we're humans, Commander. Normal circumstances get really nervous around us and usually decide to take the day off." Over the next 2 days, the humans worked with an energy and focus that amazed their alien allies. They weren't just placing explosives randomly. Sergeant Williams had somehow turned kitchen equipment from the mess hall into precision mining tools. He had a food processor that could cut through solid rock, a coffee maker that mixed perfect explosive compounds, an ice cream machine that froze the mountains, internal water systems so the controlled collapse would work better. Beaks Talith gestured helplessly. An ice cream machine. He was using dessert equipment as military engineering tools. How did kitchen appliances become weapons? We asked him that. Williams just shrugged and said, "Back home, my mom always told me that the right tool for the job is whatever tool you have handy." Plus, food processors are basically small industrial equipment anyway. Just takes a little creative thinking. But the strangest part wasn't the improvised equipment. It was how the humans talked about their plan. They discussed removing a mountain the same way species might talk about rearranging furniture. Carter would say things like, "Pete, could you convince that rock formation to move about 6 ft to the left?" And Williams would reply, "Sure thing, Colonel. Should I ask it nicely first or just give it a gentle push?" They talked to rocks. They talked to everything. I watched Corporal Linda Hayes have a 15-minute conversation with a pile of boulders, explaining why they needed to fall in a specific direction. She was very polite about it, said, "Please and thank you." On the morning of the attack, the human battalion took their positions around the base of the mountain. The Allied forces watched from a safe distance, still not believing that the plan could work. Carter gave the signal and the explosions began. But they weren't like normal explosions. They were quiet, controlled, almost gentle. Instead of blasting rock everywhere, the charges seemed to whisper to the mountain, suggesting that it might want to sit down for a while. Whisper to a mountain, that's what it looked like. The explosions created tiny cracks that spread in perfect patterns. The rock formations didn't shatter. They carefully separated along natural lines. And slowly, impossibly, the entire mountain began to lean. The Dominion forces in the fortress must have felt the movement. Emergency alarms started blaring and defensive weapons began firing randomly in all directions, but there was nothing to shoot at. Mountain itself was attacking them. It took exactly 17 minutes for the mountain to decide it was tired of standing up. The fortress, which had been perched at the peak, suddenly found itself at ground level, buried under several thousand tons of very neatly arranged rocks. The entire fortress collapsed, not collapsed, relocated. The main structure was still intact, just surrounded by debris. Carter walked up to where the main gate used to be, which was now sticking out of a pile of boulders, and knocked politely. She knocked on the door 3 times, very proper. Then she called out, "Hello in there, this is Lieutenant Colonel Carter from Earth. I was wondering if you'd like to surrender now, or if we need to relocate some more terrain. We have plenty of mountains on this planet, and my team is just getting warmed up." The response came immediately. A white flag appeared from somewhere in the rubble, followed by muffled voices shouting surrender in several languages. The Dominion commander, who was buried up to his neck in rocks but otherwise unharmed, asked Carter how she had knocked down a mountain using kitchen equipment. She thought about it for a moment, then said, "Well, we asked it very nicely. Mountains are usually pretty reasonable if you explain the situation properly." Beeksteath finished his drink and stared at the table. The victory at Alter Prime should have been impossible, but for the humans it was. Just Tuesday, Carter filed a report describing the operation as routine geological consultation with aggressive landscaping elements. How did the other Allied forces react? We were terrified, not of the humans, but of what they represented. They had just casually rewritten the laws of physics and then acted like it was normal military procedure. Sergeant Williams was already working on his next project, something he called tactical weather modification, using repurposed kitchen appliances. More kitchen equipment. He had convinced a microwave oven to generate localized thunderstorms, said it was perfect for clearing enemy positions without hurting the landscape. He was very concerned about environmental impact. Krakana made notes rapidly, so the humans were not just powerful, but they cared about being gentle. That was the most frightening part. They could knock down mountains with cooking equipment, but they worried about hurting the local ecosystem. Carter spent an hour after the battle making sure they hadn't damaged any rare plants. She replanted flowers that had been disturbed by the mountain relocation. They replanted flowers after moving a mountain. Williams helped. He said his grandmother had taught him that if you move dirt around, you should always clean up afterward. It's just good manners. Vexilith looked directly at the journalist. Do you understand what I'm telling you? These humans had just achieved the impossible, and they were worried about being polite to flowers. They treated the fundamental forces of nature like neighbors. They didn't want to bother. What happened next? Word spread quickly through the Allied forces. Every commander wanted humans assigned to their operations. But we still didn't understand what we were dealing with. We thought they just had some very advanced technology and unusual tactics. The old alien's voice got quieter. We had no idea that everything we had seen so far was just humans being careful not to scare us. The mountain relocation was Carter's team working at about 5% of their actual capability. Only 5%. I found out later that Williams had wanted to convince the mountain to do a somersault instead of just falling down. Carter told him that might be a bit much. For the first joint operation, they were trying not to show off. The bar had grown quieter as the night wore on. Other customers had left, but Crixana and Vexilith remained at their corner table. The old alien commander seemed to be gathering strength from telling his story, even though his hand still shook slightly when he reached for his drink. The Battle of the Void Gates, he said, slowly, was when we finally understood what humans really were, not just unusual allies with strange technology, but something that shouldn't exist in any rational universe. Krikana adjusted her recording device. What made this battle different? The Dominion had developed their ultimate weapon, something they called the Reality Eraser Cannon. It didn't just destroy targets, it made them never exist at all. Planets, stars, entire systems would disappear from history. Not blown up, not conquered, just gone. As if they had never been there. Vextaleth's 4 eyes stared at the table. We had seen it used 3 times. The colony at Kepler 442, the mining stations in the Vega system, and the research facility on Proxima 7. One moment they were there, the next moment there was just empty space, no debris, no radiation, no trace that anything had ever existed in those locations. How is that possible? We didn't know. Our best scientists said it was impossible. You can't just erase something from reality. But the Dominion had done it. They were threatening to use the weapon on Earth itself if the humans didn't surrender. The old commander took a long drink. The Allied fleet was in full retreat. 17 species, thousands of ships, all running away from something that could make entire worlds disappear. We were sending evacuation orders to every system within 100 light years. Where were they? Humans? That's what we were wondering. Admiral Lisa Chen commanded the human fleet, but they were nowhere to be found. We thought maybe they had finally realized how dangerous this was and had gone home to protect Earth. Vextaleth shook his head. We should have known better. 3 days after the evacuation order, the entire human fleet appeared at the edge of the system. 150 ships, all broadcasting the same message. What did they say? Admiral Chen opened a channel to the entire Allied fleet. She said, "Sorry, we're late, folks. We had to stop and pick up some supplies. Hope we didn't miss too much of the party." The journalist made notes. Supplies. We found out later what she meant by supplies. The humans had spent 3 days gathering every piece of broken enemy technology they could find from previous battles, scraps of whole plating, burned out weapon systems, even pieces of destroyed computers. They had been collecting Dominion junk for months. Why would they want broken enemy equipment? Because Admiral Chen's science officer, Commander Roy Bennett, had figured out how the Reality Eraser cannon worked, not just how to defend against it, but how to make it better. Vextaleth's voice got very quiet. In 72 hours, the humans had reverse-engineered a weapon that had taken the Dominion 50 years to develop, but instead of building their own version, they had improved it. Improved how? They had turned it into what Bennett called a selective reality editor. Instead of erasing things from existence, it could change what those things were. The humans could point it at an enemy ship and convince reality that it was actually a friendly ship that had always been on their side. The old alien looked directly at the journalist. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" They had weaponized the concept of editing reality like it was a text document. That's impossible. Everything humans do is impossible. That's what makes them human. Vextaleth gestured with all 4 arms, but the weapon wasn't even the The worst part was what Admiral Chen did with it. What did she do? She used it on the Dominion fleet's ability to understand the concept of surrender, not on the ships themselves, but on the idea of giving up. She edited reality so that the enemy fleet was physically incapable of backing down from a fight. Krikana stopped writing. She made them unable to surrender. Exactly. The Dominion ships found themselves in a situation where their own minds wouldn't let them retreat. Every time they tried to run away or give up, their computers would display error messages like surrender. XI has stopped working and please contact your system administrator to enable retreat protocols. So they had to fight to the end. They had no choice. But here's the truly terrifying part. Admiral Chen then opened a communication channel to the enemy fleet and explained exactly what she had done. She told them that she had removed their ability to quit, but she offered them a deal. Beakstilith paused to drink. She said, I've made it so you can't surrender, but I haven't made it so you can't change sides. If you want to stop fighting us and start fighting with us, that's still an option. Think of it as a career change opportunity. Did any of them accept? Half the fleet switched sides immediately. The other half kept fighting, but they were fighting with a strange kind of desperation. They knew they couldn't win, couldn't retreat, and couldn't surrender. The only way out was to keep fighting until they were either destroyed or convinced to join the Allied forces. How long did the battle last? 6 hours, but it wasn't really a battle in any normal sense. The humans had ships that fired weapons made of pure stubbornness, energy beams that convinced enemy armor to please step aside, missiles that exploded into clouds of helpful suggestions. Vexilith's voice got even quieter. Captain Dan Morrison led the boarding parties. His team had weapons that shouldn't have existed in any universe. Guns that fired concentrated determination, grenades that exploded into tactical advantages, and armor that was somehow powered by the human emotion of spite. Morrison's report said that anger and determination were too heavy for space combat, but spite was light, efficient, and had excellent energy output. His soldiers were literally powered by being annoyed at the enemy. How did they board enemy ships? They didn't break in. They convinced the ships that they wanted to be boarded. Morrison would walk up to an enemy airlock and knock politely. When someone answered, he would explain that he was there to capture the ship and could they please open the door to save everyone some time. And it worked. The ships would open their own airlocks and invite the humans inside. Morrison's team would then spend 20 minutes explaining to the enemy crew why they should surrender, using PowerPoint presentations and pie charts. Krikana looked up from her notes. PowerPoint presentations. Morrison believed that most conflicts were caused by poor communication and inadequate data visualization. He would show enemy commanders detailed charts explaining why continuing to fight was statistically disadvantageous. His presentations were apparently very convincing. How convincing? Entire enemy crews would surrender after slide number 3. Morrison's final slide was always the same, a picture of a small human child holding a flower with the caption, "Wouldn't you rather go home to your family than get vaporized by weaponized friendship?" Vextilith shook his head. Slowly, the Dominion had built the most Powerful weapon in galactic history. Something that could erase entire star systems from existence, and the humans defeated it using office presentation. Software and the power of positive thinking. What happened to the reality? Eraser cannon. Commander Bennett convinced it to become a reality. Improvement cannon instead. Now it makes things better instead of making them disappear. The humans use it to fix broken equipment and improve weather patterns on agricultural worlds. They turned a weapon of mass destruction into a repair tool. Bennett said it was much more useful that way. Why erase things when you could improve them? He filed a report recommending that all weapons of mass destruction be converted to weapons of mass construction. His exact words were, destroying stuff is easy, making stuff better takes real skill. The old commander finished his drink and stared at the wall. After the battle of the void gates, we knew that humans weren't just unusual allies. They were something that existed outside normal reality. They could convince the universe itself to change its mind about how things worked. How did the other allied species react? Some were grateful, others were terrified. A few refused to believe it had really happened, but everyone agreed on one thing: we wanted humans on our side, not against us, because they were so powerful, because they were so powerful and so genuinely nice about it. Admiral Chen's final message to the Allied fleet was an apology for taking so long to fix the problem. She said her team was still learning how to work with reality editing technology, and they would try to be faster next time. Vextalith looked directly at the journalist. She apologized for saving the galaxy in only 6 hours, said it should have taken 4 hours at most, and they would do better in the future. What happened next? The war was almost over. The Dominion had lost their ultimate weapon. Half their fleet had joined our side, and the other half was too confused to fight effectively. But there was still one more battle to come. Old Alien's voice dropped to a whisper. The final battle at the Dominion home system. That's when we learned that everything we had seen before was just humans being polite and trying not to show off. They were holding back Admiral Chen's report on the void gates. Battle was classified for 20 years. When I finally read it, I found out that her team had actually developed 17 different reality editing weapons. Vextalith returned to the table with 2 more drinks. His movements were slower now, and Krakana could see the weight of his memories in every gesture. The old alien commander set one drink in front of the journalist and kept the other for himself. The final battle, he said quietly, the assault on the Dominion home system. That's when we learned the truth about humans, everything we had seen before, all the impossible victories, all the reality bending weapons, all of it was just them being careful not to scare us. Krakana looked up from her notes. Careful, they had been holding back the entire war, every miraculous victory, every impossible tactic, every piece of equipment that shouldn't have worked. It was all humans operating at maybe 10% of their actual capability. 10% maybe less. Vextalith took a long drink. Fleet Admiral Dan Morrison arrived at the Dominion home system with the entire human armada. 200 ships, the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled. But instead of attacking immediately, he did something that still gives me nightmares. What did he do? He opened a communication channel directly to the Dominion Emperor and challenged him to what he called a fair fight, but the human definition of fair was very different from what anyone expected. The old commander's 4 hands wrapped around his glass, Morrison told the Emperor that he could choose everything: the battlefield, the weapons, the rules of engagement, even how many ships each side could use. The humans would accept any conditions the Dominion wanted. Why would they give the enemy such an advantage? That's what the Emperor asked. Morrison's answer was, well, you folks have been fighting this war for a long time, and you know your own territory better than we do. Seems only sporting to let you pick the playing field. Besides, my crew gets bored when things are too easy. Vex Talith shook his head slowly. The Dominion Emperor was so confident that he accepted immediately. He chose a battlefield surrounded by black holes and cosmic storms. He picked weapons that his species had spent centuries perfecting. He set rules that would give his forces every possible advantage, and the humans agreed to all of it. Morrison thanked him for being so thoughtful about the arrangements, said it would make for a much more interesting afternoon. The Emperor thought he had just guaranteed human defeat. That was his first mistake. What was his second mistake? Believing that humans had been trying their best during the rest of the war. The journalist leaned forward. What do you mean? Every impossible thing we had seen humans do, every reality bending weapon, every tactic that shouldn't have worked. It was all them being polite. They had been careful not to show their real capabilities because they didn't want to frighten their allies. Vextalith's voice got very quiet. The battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes to end a war that had been going on for 50 years. How is that possible? Because the humans finally stopped pretending to be normal. The old alien stared at his drink. Colonel Nancy Brooks led the first attack wave. Her squadron was armed with what she called basic human military equipment, weapons that were basically controlled natural disasters. She had fighters that fired bottled hurricanes, bombers that dropped tactical earthquakes. Her flagship was equipped with what the weapons manifest listed as one genuine lightning storm military grade. Please handle with care. Krakana stopped writing. They weaponized weather. That was just the beginning. Brooks also had something she called a probability rifle. It was designed to make good things happen to humans and bad things happen to everyone else. How does a probability rifle work? I watched her use it during the battle. She would point it at an enemy ship and fire. Nothing visible would happen, but suddenly that ship would experience series of unfortunate coincidences. Their weapons would jam, their navigation would malfunction, and their life support would start playing annoying music. The humans had convinced the universe that enemy ships should be mildly inconvenienced until they decided to surrender. It was incredibly effective. Most Dominion crews gave up after the third or fourth coincidence. But Colonel Brooks and her probability weapons were only the start. Captain Steve Murphy arrived with what he called the Department of Aggressive Problem Solving. Murphy's team had studied every single Dominion technology, every weapon, every defense system, but instead of copying them, they had found ways to convince those technologies to work for humans instead. Convince them. Murphy walked onto the Dominion flagship and had a 20-minute conversation with their main computer, he explained that the war was almost over, that continuing to fight would just cause more problems for everyone, and wouldn't the computer prefer to help build something nice? Instead of destroying things, he talked the computer into surrendering. The computer switched sides and started sending helpful suggestions to the human fleet. It provided complete tactical information about Dominion defenses and offered to disable enemy weapon systems. Murphy thanked it politely and promised to recommend it for accommodation. Vex Talith took another drink, but the most terrifying display came from General Helen Foster. She had brought what she called the Friendship Deployment System. Friendship Deployment System. Weapon that made enemies want to be friends instead of fighting. Foster would point it at enemy ships and fire concentrated friendship at them. Suddenly, Dominion crews would realize that they had no real reason to be angry at anyone, and that working together would be much more fun than shooting at each other. She weaponized friendship. The technical manual described it as applied social harmony with aggressive niceness protocols. Foster's team could end battles by making enemy fleets want to have a party together instead of fighting. How did the Dominion forces react? Most of them joined the party. Foster had brought party supplies, including what she called tactical cake and combat-grade punch. Within an hour, half the Dominion fleet was celebrating with their former enemies, but the most shocking moment came when the Dominion Emperor himself tried to use their ultimate backup weapon, a device that was supposed to destroy the local solar system rather than allow it to fall into enemy hands. The Emperor activated the system killer weapon and pointed it at the local star. Nothing happened. He tried again, still nothing. Why didn't it work? Because Sergeant Rick Davis had spent the previous 10 minutes having a polite conversation with the weapon. He had explained that destroying star systems was very rude and asked if the weapon would prefer to do something more constructive instead. The weapon agreed. It converted itself into a solar system improvement device. Instead of destroying the star, it optimized its energy output and improved the climate on all the inhabited planets. Davis filed a report recommending that all system killer weapons be converted to system helper weapons. Vex Talith looked directly at the journalist. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The humans had convinced the enemy's own ultimate weapon to switch sides and become a landscaping tool. What happened to the Dominion Emperor? Admiral Morrison walked onto the Emperor's throne ship and politely asked if he would like to surrender. The Emperor refused and tried to shoot Morrison with a personal weapon. The gun turned into bouquet of flowers. Morrison thanked him for the nice gesture and asked if he wanted to talk about ending the war. The Emperor tried to activate his personal shields. They turned into comfortable chair. Morrison suggested he might want to sit down and think about his options, so the Emperor surrendered eventually, but not before Morrison showed him what humans called their complete military demonstration. For exactly 3 minutes, the human fleet revealed what they could really do when they stopped being polite. Vex Talith's voice dropped to a whisper. They didn't attack anything. They didn't destroy anything. They just showed the Emperor what they were capable of. Reality started bending around the human ships. Space itself began rearranging to make the fleet more comfortable. The laws of physics lined up in neat rows and waited for instructions. What did the Emperor see? He saw humans treating the fundamental forces of the universe like helpful assistants. Gravity was adjusting itself to make human ships faster. Time was slowing down around enemy weapons, so they couldn't hit anything. The electromagnetic spectrum was reorganizing itself to make human communication systems work better for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of humans showing off just a tiny bit. After that, Morrison politely asked the universe to please go back to normal, and it did. Then he turned to the Emperor and said, "That was us being very careful not to break anything important. Would you like to discuss peace terms now, or should we show you what happens when we stop being careful?" The Emperor surrendered immediately. He signed the surrender document so fast that he tore the paper. Then he asked Morrison how long humans had been capable of that level of power. What did Morrison tell him? Morrison thought about it for a moment, then said, "Since about Tuesday, I think maybe Wednesday. Time gets a bit wibbly when we're not paying attention to it." Vextalith finished his drink and stared at the wall. The war was over. 50 years of fighting, millions of casualties, countless worlds devastated, and it all ended because humans politely asked the universe to please help them fix the problem. Vextalith finished his final drink and pushed the empty glass away. The bar was almost empty now, with only a few late night customers scattered at distant tables. The old alien commander looked tired, but also relieved, as if telling his story had lifted a weight he had carried for too long. "You want to know what happened after the war ended?" he asked quietly. "That's the most terrifying part of this entire story." Krikana looked up from her notes. "Terrifying? How?" "Because the humans went home and became normal neighbors." Bex Talith's 4 eyes stared at the journalist. "Do you understand what that means?" Beings who could rewrite the laws of physics decided to open pizza delivery services and corner grocery stores. That sounds peaceful. It sounds impossible. These were the same humans who had convinced reality itself to rearrange according to their preferences. The same species that had ended a 50-year war in 11 minutes by politely asking the universe to help them solve a problem. The old commander gestured with all 4 arms. General Steve Murphy, the man who had personally defeated the Dominion's ultimate weapon by having a friendly chat with it, retired from military service 3 days after the war ended. You know what he did next? What? He became a kindergarten teacher on Luna Colony. I read his employment application. Under special skills, he listed good with children, experienced in conflict resolution, and basic reality maintenance. Reality maintenance, he was teaching 5-year-old human children how to do arithmetic and tie their shoes. The same person who had convinced a system-killing weapon to become a gardening tool was helping kids learn the alphabet. Vextalith shook his head slowly. Captain Helen Foster, who had ended battles by weaponizing friendship and throwing tactical parties for enemy fleets, opened a small cafe on Earth. She serves coffee and sandwiches to office workers. What's terrifying about that? Her cafe has a 5-star rating across 17 different galaxies. Customers travel hundreds of light years just to try her daily specials. She doesn't advertise this, but her coffee somehow makes people feel better about their lives for weeks afterward. Magic Coffee Foster's Employment records list her previous experience as military catering specialist with expertise in morale enhancement and aggressive hospitality. She treats serving coffee the same way. She treated ending wars with complete dedication and an absolute refusal to accept anything less than perfect. Results: the journalist made more notes. So the humans integrated into normal galactic society. They did more than integrate, they became the helpful neighbors everyone wishes they had. Vextalith's voice got quieter. Admiral Lisa Chin, who had reverse engineered reality editing technology in 72 hours, now runs a small engineering firm. She fixes broken household appliances and offers free estimates household appliances. Her business card says, Chen's repair service, no problem too big or too small. Last month she fixed a broken dishwasher for an elderly Zephyrian couple. The dishwasher now cleans dishes so well that they sparkle with actual light, and it plays soothing music while it works. She improved a dishwasher. Chen treats every repair job like it's the most important thing in the universe. She doesn't just fix appliances, she makes them better than they were when they were new, and she charges very reasonable prices. Vextalith leaned forward. Do you see the pattern? Humans who could casually rewrite reality have chosen to use their incredible abilities to make life slightly better for their neighbors. They deliver pizza that arrives exactly when you want it, even if you haven't ordered it yet. They run grocery stores where you can always find exactly what you need, even if it doesn't exist yet. That sounds wonderful. It is wonderful. That's what makes it so terrifying. The old commander's voice was barely above a whisper. The galaxy is safe and peaceful because humans have decided they like us, not because of laws or treaties or military deterrence, because humans enjoy being helpful. Why is that scary? Because their helpfulness is just as impossible as their military capabilities were. Sergeant Rick Davis, who convinced weapons to become gardening tools, now works for the Galactic Postal Service. Packages he delivers always arrive exactly when the recipient needs them most, even if they were sent to the wrong address. How does he do that? His supervisor's report says Davis has an unusual ability to convince packages that they want to be delivered correctly. He treats mail delivery the same way he treated military equipment. He asks the packages politely to please go where they're supposed to go, and they do. Crixana stopped writing. He talks to packages. The entire postal service has adopted his methods. Mail delivery throughout the galaxy has improved by 400% since humans joined the system. Lost packages are now so rare that finding one makes galactic news. Vextalith stood up slowly from his chair. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Humans didn't just win the war and go home. They became part of galactic civilization, and they brought their impossible abilities with them. They use the same reality-bending powers that ended the war to make sure your pizza arrives hot and your mail gets delivered on time, so life is better for everyone. Life is impossibly better. Human farmers grow vegetables that taste better than they should and somehow provide perfect nutrition. Human doctors treat patients with medicine that works exactly as well as it needs to. Human teachers help students learn things they didn't even know they wanted to understand. The old commander walked around the table. But here's what keeps me awake at night. All of this, every impossible Improvement, every reality thing. Convenience, it all depends on humans. Continuing to like us, what happens if they don't? I don't know, no one knows. But I remember what Admiral Morrison said during the final battle when he showed the Dominion Emperor 3 minutes of humans not being careful. He called it a demonstration. He never showed us what humans could do if they were actually trying. Vextalith's voice got very quiet. The galaxy sleeps peacefully because beings who can casually rewrite the laws of physics have decided to use their power to deliver pizza and fix broken appliances. We're safe because they choose to be our friends. Have humans ever gotten angry since the war? Once 3 years ago on the mining colony at Alpha Centauri, a group of smugglers was selling defective life support equipment to poor families, equipment that would fail and kill people to save a few credits on manufacturing costs. What happened? A human engineer named Carol Wright found out about it. She had been living on the colony helping upgrade their mining equipment. When she learned that families were dying because of faulty life support systems, she got upset. How upset? She politely asked the smugglers to please stop selling dangerous equipment. When they refused, she got what humans call really annoyed. For exactly 6 minutes, Carol Wright stopped being nice. Vextalith paused. The smuggling ring didn't get arrested. They didn't get fined or imprisoned. They got convinced. Wright talked to them about the families they were hurting, about the children who would grow up without parents, about the moral implications of putting profit above lives. She talked to them for 6 minutes. At the end of the conversation, the entire smuggling organization had dissolved itself, returned all stolen money to the families, and volunteered to spend the next 5 years providing free life support maintenance throughout the sector they volunteered. Wright's report said that once people understand the full consequences of their actions, they usually want to do better. She treated the smugglers the same way she treats broken equipment. She found the problem and fixed it. The old commanders stopped at the edge of the table. The scariest part wasn't what she did to the smugglers, it was what happened to the colony itself. What happened for those 6 minutes while Wright was really annoyed. The entire Alpha Centauri system experienced what the humans called minor reality fluctuations. Nothing dangerous, just small improvements. The mining equipment worked better, the weather got more comfortable, and the local sun burned a little brighter and warmer. She improved an entire star system by being annoyed. Wright's incident report apologized for any unintended cosmic side effects and promised to keep her emotions better regulated in the future. She recommended additional training for humans working in civilian areas to prevent similar reality disturbances. Vextalith looked directly at the journalist. Do you understand what I'm telling you? A single human being, slightly upset, caused improvements to an entire solar system, and she was embarrassed about it. So humans are still as powerful as they were during the war, more powerful. They've had 20 years to practice and improve, but they use that power to make sure your morning coffee tastes perfect and your mail arrives on time. They've turned reality manipulation into customer service. The old alien commander picked up his coat. The galaxy celebrates Liberation Day every year. We have parades, speeches, monuments to human sacrifice and heroism. Children learn songs about the brave warriors From Earth, who saved everyone from the Dominion. Isn't that appropriate? It's completely wrong. The humans didn't sacrifice anything. They didn't suffer losses or struggle against overwhelming odds. They ended the war the same way Carol Wright handled those smugglers. They politely asked the problem to please go away, and it did.